Thank you, everybody, for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Jeremiah DeGullen with the Center for Professional and Executive Development. Welcome to today's webinar on professional goal setting and navigating your career journey, part of the 2022 alumni webinar series. Before we get started, I wanted to turn things over briefly to Shannon Tim from the Wisconsin School of Business. Shannon?
Thanks, Jeremiah. My name is Shannon Tim, and I'm the Director of Alumni Relations at the Wisconsin School of Business. It's great to be with everyone today, and thanks for joining. It's a new year, and naturally, a lot of us, I think, are thinking about goals. So I'm thrilled that we have Betsy here to guide us through today's topic on goal setting, and Jeremiah will introduce her in just a bit. Before we get started, we can go to the next slide here. I just wanted to share an upcoming event that you might be interested in. On February 1st, we're going to be hosting a virtual networking event for alumni. So this is a great way to meet people from all over the country. It's fun, it's fast-paced, and you can meet up to 6 people in an hour. We're also finalizing some details for additional events in the upcoming months, so stay tuned to your email or visit the alumni section on business.wisc.edu. That's where you can find all the information about all the events and opportunities that we have. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeremiah to get us started.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Today's webinar is also brought to you by the Wisconsin School of Business Center for Professional and Executive Development. CPED offers online and in-person programs and certificates that will give you the modern, relevant skills needed to advance in your career. All of our programs offer interactive learning sessions facilitated by instructors with practical business experience. CPED also partners with organizations to provide customized professional development programs, coaching, and consulting. For more information on the Center for Professional and Executive Development, please visit our website at uwcped.org. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask during today's webinar, you can submit those questions using the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. And you can expand or collapse that control panel using the orange arrow. We'll pose questions that are submitted during the Q&A at the end of today's webinar. I also just want to mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation will be made available in the coming days. And now, I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Betsy Hagan. Betsy is an instructor and independent consultant specializing in organizational effectiveness, talent development, and executive coaching. Her background includes 25 years of executive leadership experience in corporate human resources, operations, and program management with Hewitt Associates, LLC, a $3 billion HR consulting and outsourcing provider, and Baxter Healthcare, a $10 billion leading manufacturer of medical products. Today, she leads CPED's Foundations of Management certificate, focused on helping managers motivate their teams, influence stakeholders, leverage resources, and enhance business processes. Betsy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll pass it on over to you.
Thanks, Jeremiah. So thank you for and Shannon for inviting me back to speak. I think the last time I was here in front of all you guys was over a year ago talking about delegation. So I was originally asked to come in and talk about professional goal setting. And while I love the subject and I talk about the subject a lot, honestly, what I talk about in goal setting across the board, I can teach in a very short period of time. It's basically 3 things, right? It is make sure that whatever goal, whether they're your professional goals, whether they're your performance goals for the year, whether there's some kind of life goal that you have, just make sure that they're as specific and clear as possible using SMART goal modeling, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. You guys probably already heard that, right? Make sure that you're communicating those goals to other people. That helps you create accountability for yourself and sort of increase that sort of awareness of others, that of things you're trying to work on. And then finally, make sure that whatever you're setting for yourself in terms of goals is really aligned to things that matter to you, because honestly, motivation to achieve those goals is completely self-directed. And so if it's not aligned to things that really matter, then there's a lighter likelihood that you're going to actually follow through with those things. And that's the piece that I thought maybe would be beneficial for us to spend time around. This idea of, so what is the longer term impact and effect of the professional goals that we set? And so I have just probably maybe 40 minutes with you guys. I thought maybe we would try to accomplish a few things, one of which was just to get you to consider your professional goals in the perspective of something larger, like the overall journey that you're taking in your career. From an alignment perspective, really make sure that the things that you might be focused on in terms of professional goals, really, that they are anchored in values, understood values and beliefs that help steer the direction of where you want to go. I think we should probably talk about opportunities and barriers along the way in the journey and how you might be able to address those and deal with them. I'd like to challenge a little bit this idea that our definition of success in our overall professional journeys that we take have to do with how much we climb that ladder of success, so to speak. And then finally, I'd like to just introduce this concept of career moments, which is something that I talk in my executive coaching world quite a bit with people who are looking to kind of determine not just definitively what's the next job that I get, but what am I driving to? And career best moments are something I think that it's important for us as professionals to kind of keep in the back of our mind, so that we're evaluating our opportunities against what it's going to bring to us and what it's going to bring to that longer term journey that we're on in the way of our career. So Brooke, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So why am I using this metaphor of journey? It's probably, there's a lot of metaphors we use. I've heard people talk about the rat race. There's a lot of metaphors we use when we talk about our careers and the professional goals that we set. But I think one of the most common ones, and one that resonates, I think, with most of us, is this idea that we believe ourselves to be on a journey, depending on where you're at in your stage in life. You may be at the beginning of the journey, you may be somewhere mid in the journey, or you may be at the end of the journey. But when we talk about our careers and our professions and what's next for us, very much we tend to use a language that the imagery is very much like traveling, like motion, like a journey, right? We talk about career paths that we're on. We ask ourselves, are we on the right track? Are we headed in the right direction? Brooke, if you go to the next slide. And we kind of evaluate our objectives, right? What we're trying to accomplish in journey-like terms, right? So what's next for me conversation can be about not only a destination, like I want that job or I want to work for that kind of organization, but also we have a lot of we have a lot of reflection around what's the best route to take to get to where we want to go. Is the route clear of things that could get in our way, and where are the opportunities within that route to make progress against those goals? I talked about it in the last slide. I'll talk about it again. This idea of, is our success along that journey really evaluated against how high we climb, so to speak, in the ascent of our journey and where we're going. And finally, do we consider really our career this idea of a set of experiences, right, that we have over time, a set of evolving experiences. And is that how we evaluate success in terms of where we are today versus where we want to be tomorrow? And are we gaining the experiences that we want, to kind of label not only the outcome of what we're trying to do in our careers, but also the experiences that we're having along the way in the travel, so to speak. So, Brooke, if you could go to the next slide. When we think about careers, to me, it sits in sort of two primary flavors of what's the next step and how do we leap off from that. The first flavor is sort of what I call the predetermined pathways that get established for careers. You might be in a profession where maybe the professional standards and qualifications have to be met in order for you to move to a next phase. I think about doctors and lawyers, even there are areas within finance, right, where you have to achieve certain things and be able to do certain things, meet certain qualifications before you can move into or onto or beyond where you're at today. Those things are predetermined for us, right? We don't necessarily influence those. We can't change those. And those predetermined kind of pathways that are created in our careers are good sometimes from the perspective of we know where we need to go next. It's clearly laid out for us, and we understand the process of getting from where we are today to where we need to be tomorrow. And there's a sense of security that can be found in that. I don't have to do a lot of thinking about what's next for me, because what's next for me is kind of laid out. Sometimes people are in organizations where the organization itself has done a good job at creating a very clear and forward-moving career path for people. I think about my time at Hewitt Associates. We had certain roles that started out, you started out as a business analyst, you moved into a quality assurance role, you then moved into a team managerial role, and then you moved into a team leadership role. Though that career path was laid out, and there was very clear development opportunities, development support systems, right, that went along with that. If you're part of an organization who does that today, again, you may have a very clear picture of where your opportunities are. Again, those kinds of career situations that we find ourselves in, they're nice, and they make it so that we don't have to do a lot of work to that. We know where we're going. We know how to get there. I mean, it leads to somewhat of security. But for many of us, career management and career objectives, setting professional development goals feels more improvisational. That what we're doing is sort of, we're here today, we're looking out at that horizon, we're seeing what those opportunities are, and then we're determining the path that we might take based on whatever option we might choose to go forward. The other thing is that we may approach our careers from, well, I'm in my job today, it's an okay job, but if something comes up tomorrow, I'll look at that, I'll evaluate it at the time that that opportunity arises. So those are kind of two primary ways of which we might take that next step. One of which is very prescriptive and one is more improvised, or happens just by chance that we have opportunities that come across. For a moment, I'd just like you to consider your past professional goals that you've had, and whether or not you've considered those to be more predetermined based on, again, whether it's your profession or whether it's the organizational supports that are there to guide you in your careers, or whether it's been more improvisational, right? And what the difference of those are in your current set of professional goals that you might have for yourself. Are they more prescribed, or are they more improvisational? Next slide, please, Brooke. Whatever it is, what we know is that the idea of staying in the same role, let's say, for a long period of time is no longer the norm. It hasn't been the norm in, at least in the private sector, in the way of how we've seen people navigate their careers. Today, I think people probably change jobs about 10 to 15 times over the course of their career. That might seem like a lot, but when you think about even changing responsibilities within your current job today, so you may take on a significant set of responsibilities and may not have a title change, but that doesn't mean that you haven't, in fact, changed the nature of the job and the work that you're doing, so much so that you would declare it something different on a resume. That can be thought of as a job change. It doesn't just have to be about title. But we see it, quite a bit on the increase. It's also, when you think about it in the workplace, Brooke, if you could go to the next slide, you see it happening generationally, right? So boomers on average have lasted about 8 years per major role that they've had. Gen Xers about 5, millennials about 2, and Gen Z too early yet to really define them, but they are appearing to at least meet the millennial change a pace of about 2 years. So whether or not that it increases quite a bit, we know that right now we're experiencing a significant amount of people, if not actually making a change in their jobs, they're thinking about it. And I think so much is being stated and said in the media today about the great resignation of employees, that people are even looking at their job saying, should I be doing something differently? Should I be rethinking what it is that I'm doing, since it seems to be everyone else is? So I think the idea of really contemplating and considering what are your professional goals that you've set for yourself and how does it fit in this overall bigger journey of career is timely, it's relevant. And again, I think it's supportive of making sure that whatever it is you might have your eye on in terms of what's next for you, that you're doing so in a way that's aligned to things that are really going to matter, meaning you are actually going to get the satisfaction of the change and feeling it in terms of what is going to create a positive working environment for you, a positive work experience for you. Brooke, let's go to the next slide, because what I want to do is just get a sense from you guys on where you're at right now in terms of number of positions. So Brooke is going to bring up a poll just to get a sense of how many jobs have you had so far in your life post high school. So do me a favor and do a mental tally and report back, pick one that reflects how many jobs. You can define job however you want to, but how many jobs would you say you've had so far? So Brooke will let me know when the poll is finished and she will put up the result. Okay, so right, you've got 42% have had at least 6 to 10 jobs, right? So you can see that probably for those of you, even for those of you maybe in the earliest stages of your career, you may be looking at even beating the 20 plus mark by the time you have a number of years under your belt. And so this idea, thanks Brooke, of how many jobs and where are those jobs and how did those jobs kind of evolve, the notion of what's next for us, I think sits in the context of it could be a lot of different things. It could be something very singular. So my next question to you guys, Brooke, we'll take it to the next slide. And then, so my question to you now is, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the least confident and 10 being the most confident, how sure are you about what job will come next? So I think that as I look at this, it doesn't surprise me that when we think about that idea of a prescribed or a preset pathway versus an improvised or a less defined pathway. I think for the majority of us, right, we sit in a notion of, I'm not quite sure what's next for me, and I'm not quite sure what that next job is going to look like. So Brooke, if we can go to the next slide, please. So the thing that I encourage, regardless of where you're at in your careers, right, where you're at in your journeys, that the idea of single destination professional goals can be problematic if in fact you don't have those goals anchored in authentic values that you desire for the totality of the journey, or at least the majority of the journey. What I mean by that is, we need to think about not just what's next, but what's next after that. And so the idea of striving for a particular job, a particular title, right, is dangerous in the fact of we may get what we want and yet it still may not satisfy us in terms of those things that are really important to us. I tell the story all the time of I often am dealing with people at two ends of the career spectrum, either younger folks that are early on in their careers, or people who are have quite a bit of experience in their careers, and they are making some critical decisions about the way in which they want to kind of spend the last part of their career phases. Right, so the first and the last, the beginning and the ending, and it's interesting because what I find quite a bit is in those that are in the first stages of them, the drivers and things that they're looking for are very much job focused. They're looking at how do I, for example, earn more income. And so if I need to be promoted in order to earn more income, I don't know that I care that much about what that promotion is all about. If I have to be a manager, then I want to be a manager, because manager is how I'm going to make more money. The challenge is that when they get to that managerial position, the position itself is not doesn't satisfy all of their needs and what really drives them in terms of their own motivational requirements, and that creates a dynamic tension of, okay, I've gotten the increase in income that I wanted to come with it, but the job itself is not satisfying to me. On the other hand, I have at the other end of the spectrum people who have are not driven by things like income anymore. They're not driven by things by security. What they're looking for are things like experiences that they're having. They want meaningful and purpose-driven kind of work that reflects brings forward all of the experiences that they've had, and allows them to apply them, let's say, in a situation. So how can I basically use my time to support, for example, nonprofits, or how do I use my time and energy to get back in or give back to the communities that that have served me before. In all cases, though, you're looking at this idea of the relationship between a single particular goal or objective that you have and what it is in totality that you're really looking to accomplish and achieve. What are those values that you're striving for? Let's go to the next slide, Brooke, if we can. So what do I mean by career values? I'm talking about really the ideals and motives and beliefs that help you identify what's most important at any point in this journey, right? Knowing what you value in a job and in the workplace, that can help you not evaluate not only the specific destinations that you might want to look at, but also the experiences, right, that you want to have, those experiences that create high levels of satisfaction. And without them, you may become dissatisfied. Let's go to the next slide, if we can. So what do I mean by the values that we have? I think about them in 3 different buckets, right? So I think about them in terms of intrinsic values, these things that are driven from within. These are things like positive feelings we have about the work that we do. And we typically see those positive feelings being driven in primarily by 4 different dimensions. The first dimension is sort of challenge and mastery, this idea that what I'm doing, I feel like I'm gaining greater and greater knowledge. I'm getting more and more skillful or knowledgeable about a certain subject or a thing that I care about. But also autonomy, that as I'm moving through this journey, right, I am gaining greater and greater independence, or the ability to have independence in the work that I do, and that it's meaningful, that my work is connected. I can see the connection to some greater purpose. And finally, there's an element of progress, that I see that in the work that I do, I feel the progress, and progress is for me, helps me to drive that feeling of success. So I set a goal, I achieve a goal, we achieve a goal together, whatever those things might be, but we see our work as being progressive. We see it being connected. On the extrinsic side, these are things that we care about. They're tangible in terms of what we get from the work we do. So we bring our best work. We are valued for that work by the organization, by the people we work for, and it's very tangible things that we get. These things like rewards, right? But also recognition. We get status at work. We have authority through work, and we also, through that combination of autonomy and what we're given from that autonomy is flexibility, right? We're given the flexibility to either work the way we want to work, or solve problems in ways that we are able to determine the best solution to the problem that we're solving at work. And then finally, it's kind of second tier if you think about intrinsic and extrinsic values, but it's important, and I think it's really important right now. I think we've all experience this, which is our lifestyle values, right? So this is this idea that we're driven, those things that drive us to a bigger picture of how work influences how we live, right? So we think about it like these are values that help us find work in the way in which we want to live, or we make decisions about how work influences how we live. A great example is location, right? So for some folks, what they do needs to happen within a particular kind of location, like a big city or not a big city, right? those things like flexible work hours or the ability to work when we want to work, where we want to work, right, can make a big difference. But it's also how work supports things like physical and mental wellness. We may choose careers, or looking for careers that allow us to practice some kind of wellness, whatever that might be is. And in totality, when you think about our lifestyle values, what we are driving to in many ways are the things we need in order for us to create stability and security, right, for ourselves and what we want. And so when we know these things and we think about what is most important to us, then any single job or destination, opportunity, right, we can put it in the context of overall, what are those things that are most important to us and what is really driving us right now? And if I get one side of the value proposition right, am I actually having to give up something on the other side? So what I do with folks who are in places where they're thinking about what's next for themselves and or evaluating opportunities that they might have next for themselves is this really the direction that I want to go? Is this really the right next step for me? I actually have them think about choosing the things right now that are most important to them. And so I use a tool similar to what I'm going to show you guys next. So Brooke, if you'll advance the slide, which is just a list. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just an example for you guys to look at. But you know, basically, I work with people and say, so tell me what it is that is most important to you right now. And then I ask them, how does this complement or how does it compete with any other value that you see for yourself? And so I'm going to give you guys just a second to scan this list to maybe think about right now, if you thought about your professional goal that you have sitting in front of you, whatever that might be is, pick the top 3 things off of this list that you would say are most important to you right now. I'm going to give you a second just to reflect. So in your reflection, now what I want you to do is we're just going to do a quick compare and contrast to understand what I mean by now you have to reflect on what are the commitments or what are the things that complement or potentially compete with each other in terms of what you actually value in the work that you do, in the environment that you create, in this journey that you have. So Brooke, let's just go through. So Brooke's going to put up a series of questions for you to answer, which gives you sort of like, is it this or is it that? Kind of the optometrist view. So the first question is, the idea of making money motivates me a great deal. Okay, so good to know. Money matters, right? Let's go to the next question though. So the next question, money is not as important as personal satisfaction at work. right? So we want money, but if you put it in terms of against something else, it's going to fall down slightly lower. Personal satisfaction sits above it for many of us, right? Okay, let's go to the next set of questions. I would rather have subject matter expertise than influence or authority at work. Split 50-50. All right, let's go to the next question. I want work that will lead to senior management positions. Right? So in this case, the juxtaposition of those two concepts are, is there an assumption that I can be a subject matter and I can be a senior leader within the organization? That is an important assumption to basically chase down and find out whether in fact it is true that the leadership positions allow enough time to maintain subject matter expertise, because in a lot of cases, it's a trade-off that has to be made. Want to be a senior leader, you are not going to have the time necessarily to go deep in any particular subject matter. That's not always true, but it's something that you have to reflect on. Let's go to the next set of questions. I just have a couple more. Having enough leisure time away from work is very important to me. Right. Right. We could say absolutely 100%. This is important. So let's go to the next question. For the right money, I'd travel 50% of the time for my job. Yeah, right. So we get, you see the split go further. This isn't a direct comparative question, but you can kind of see where I'm going with this. So let's go to the next slide, if you don't mind, Brooke, out of this. I just wanted to give you guys a sense of what you value is some things are always going to be anchored and some things are going to be transitional. Like right now, what's really important to me are these three things. I'm anchored in two aspects, but I really, right now, I care about these three things. But you have to know in what order, in what rank do you care about those things? What is truly most important? This is critical because, in fact, if you are on a predetermined career path, you know, the thinking about these things further in advance, other than just what's my next job that I'm going to get, right, is important, because honestly, at the end of the day, what you want to try to do is reverse engineer a career journey based on those things that you are truly anchored in, right? What are the longest term professional goals you have, and then work backwards from there so that you can always determine whether or not especially in predetermined paths, what's next or what's next after that, right? That might be predetermined is going to actually make sense and create environments where you are, in fact, meeting those satisfying needs because it's aligned to your values and your beliefs. And for those who are more improvisational, and it's less about the what's already carved in a pathway, but more what are the opportunities, you need those anchors, both in short term and long term, to basically understand the trade-offs that you might make with what I gain in this particular decision that I make about directionally where I go in my career, what's after that, and how long do I think that I can maintain a level of satisfaction in the next step in the journey, right? And so I think about it like I tell people all the time, I'm like, think about what your advice would be, right, to your younger self. If you were not telling yourself now what you would do, but rather think of what you would want your your end of career self to be telling you about your career choices right now. Let's go to the next slide. So these paths that we choose, that we have all these different opportunities and options to go on, they tend to follow a certain kind of topography when it comes to how we think navigating the challenges, the barriers, the obstacles that we come across. Let's go to the next slide, if you don't mind, Brooke. Thanks. 3 ways that we think about the careers. I've already talked about kind of one of them, which is this occupational career, where we get into occupations where career paths are typically very clearly defined by the kinds of requirements, the standards, professional standards that we have to meet in order to move to something else, right? We might be able to pick things like the location of the work that we're doing, but when it comes to actually moving forward or creating a journey, other than location, we are not in 100% control over where we can go and how we get there. Those kinds of occupational career paths, I think the kinds of barriers that get in the way are sometimes in order to achieve a certain standard of level of performance, understanding, passing through the gate, so to speak. It can take time, it can take money, and it is about our own willingness to basically do the work that is required of us to get to where we to be able to pass through the gate that is set up for us. Organizational career routes, a little bit different, right? So what I mean by organizational career routes is sometimes people find organizations that they just like to be in. Maybe they're in because they are aligned to the organizational purpose. I have talked to people who, for example, work in medical fields, in professional medical fields, not as clinicians, but as as suppliers, as manufacturers, because they see the purpose between the products that they support and the ability for people to basically stay well and be healthy, and the commitment and contribution that it makes to world health on its own, let's say. And they'll say, this is the industry that I've chosen because I see a real connection to purpose. So organizationally, they're either there, they want to stay within the organization or within the industry. And what they're doing is sort of, they're finding their way to different opportunities, maybe based on an area of expertise like marketing or sales, or maybe it is a more generalist view of what I'm really looking for, interesting problems within the organization to solve. But our drive is really to an organization or a set of organizations that sit in an industry, right? And so this is understanding the barriers that come along with that. A lot of times are around one, the existence of opportunities for growth because of the limited number of roles that are available. So you think about organizations like pyramids, right? So a lot of entry-level kind of roles at the bottom, and as you go up into the organization, into areas of authority and leadership, right, fewer and fewer roles exist. So there's this tension and barrier that's created just around finding the opportunity. The other thing that absolutely happens is organizational politics occur, right? And so you hit a plateau of growth and opportunity to where it seemingly can be about who you know versus what you know. It can seemingly be about whether or not you are aligned to a certain group or leader who then takes you and supports your continued development and growth. And so those may not be fair, and they may not be what you wished they would be, but they're in reality often happens in organizational career routes. Those are barriers that you have to overcome and look. And then I think many of us are experiencing or wish we could experience more of an entrepreneurial or boundary crossing career routes. That is, we are less likely to think about either the deep rooted profession that we are in, or the organizational context or industry context that we're in. And what we're really looking for are opportunities to take a unique set of skills and apply them in a number of different ways, right? This could be about going out on your own and basically being in and of itself a business, right? Taking on the mentality of I am the business. I think a lot of us, especially over the past few years where the gig economy has really gone up, have begun to think about, is this right for me? Is it better for me to kind of be less attached to either the profession or the industry or the organization, and really make me be the organization, make me be the work itself, and hire myself out to do what is needed to do. This, I think, is something that people are exploring more and more. There's clear barriers to this, one of which is you are giving up sometimes a significant amount of security in order to do that. You are in a higher risk environment for the consistency of work. You're at the sometimes the mercy of what kind of demand there is, but also what people are willing to pay for that kind of work. So you have different barriers and objectives that you come across. Let's go to the next slide, because I want to make sure that there is enough time. I told you that I really wanted to challenge you guys thinking about ascent isn't the only direction. So this is something that I think, especially when we are in the early stages of our careers, we consider success and really progress in the journey as going up, right? I need to continue to go up. And much of that is really rooted in this idea of what we're really trying to do is to grow our compensation. We need to grow that compensation. And we see the only way to do that is by looking for those up opportunities. And there's some truth to that, without a doubt, there's some truth to that. But at the same time, we have to be careful that we are not overlooking the fact that career movement is more like a lattice. Over the period of the journey, it's going to look more like a lattice than it is a straight ascent. So, Brooke, can you go to the next slide, please? I just threw out an example of a career map, right? Using my own example, these are all the jobs that I've had over the course of my career. And you can see in my example that there's plenty of places where I moved up, but then there were some that I moved over. And actually, I made a decision to actually take a step down in order to move over into a different career path, into a different competency area, to build competency to a new path. I made a decision that way. Took a lot of lateral moves over, not necessarily because what I was trying to do was at that point in time driven by I have to go over and to get to the next up. It was really more of there was a problem there that I wanted to really work on. I wanted to really be a part of. And at this point stage in my career, when I started to do more overs, is when I started to realize that it isn't just about the job that I have, but the experiences that go along with the job. So I had taken jobs sometimes simply because I wanted to work in a certain area, because I thought that the people there were really talented and I wanted to work on some of the problems that they were focused on. So I moved away from what is the job title that I'm going for, and I really went to what are those job experiences. So I think it's important for us to see career movement as a lattice versus a ladder. Next slide, please. So when you think about those career journeys that kind of transcend the idea of it's always up, I think that there's a knowledge to experience journey that that we have to consider. What is it that I want to gain in terms of competency and knowledge and experiences that sort of like fulfill me? And so it's not just about the what jobs am I acquiring, but rather what is the knowledge and experience that I'm getting as I'm traveling. I think the problem solution journey is also an interesting one, where at some point in time you might look at it and go, there are problems that I really want to work on. And so how do I find my way to the opportunity to work on those kinds of problems? And maybe it's within the organizational context, maybe it's within the professional context, you know, the occupational professional context, but maybe it is also just entrepreneurial. I want to work on these kinds of problems. And then I think one that we don't always think about, maybe till the last phases of our career, but I think that there's plenty of opportunity to think about it in the beginning of your careers as well, is the giving back journey, supporting communities and institutions that have helped you along the way. I have a client who is, you know, a 30-year senior executive, you know, C-suite executive who is, you know, wants his next role to be at a particular organization that he wants to give back to. So he's not doing this from a charitable perspective. He wants to work for them. He wants this, but he believes that he has a unique set of skills and the desire to help this organization because it happened to be an organization who helped him in the past. And so he's looking at the connection between he's at a point in his journey, or he's driven in his journey by this idea of giving back. And in this case, it's to a particular organization. These kinds of perspectives, right, can really help us think differently beyond just the am I going up, right? And it helps us not to ignore the need to go up and to ascend in our career, but rather to see the opportunities and times that are not just about moving up, to be of value and something that we can gain from as part of our overall career journey. Let's go to the next slide, and then I want to get to some questions I'm going over a little bit. The last thing that I want to leave you guys with when you think about your opportunities and you think about what you're doing and where you're going is this idea of what we're really looking for beyond the single destinations that we get to in our career. I think are these career best moments, which will happen to us hopefully throughout our career, but we may not find that exact place that represents all three of these things simultaneously for the entirety of our career, right? We might be moving around in search of career best moments. Career best moments are ideas where basically what we are interested, what we are passionate about, right, aligns to what we're talented, what we can do, what we're capable of doing, and align to what the business or profession needs. When those three things come together, we tend to have highly satisfying work experiences. Now, can they be negatively influenced by things like a bad boss? Sure, but we're more likely to stick out the conditions that might be happening around us that create some dissatisfactions if those three things are in alignment with one another. If we're in alignment of those three things, and we have a good boss, and we like the organization that we're working for, this tends to be a highly productive time in people's careers. Why? Because we're sort of like, we're working on something that really matters. It's something we care about, and we, in fact, have already some demonstrated mastery to it. So when you think about the opportunities that you have, and you think about what is it that you're really evaluating those opportunities against, one of the things I think you should consider is whether or not it would present itself to be a career best moment. And a lot of times what happens is that, hey, I'm really talented at it and the business needs me to do it, but I'm not particularly passionate about this. And with that piece missing, then just understand that there's a likelihood at some point in time that even if you're good at it and the business needs you to do it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to result in a highly satisfying work experience for you, and not have you continue to look out at the horizon for the next thing that you want to try to experience. All right, last, and then I want to get to some questions I went over a little bit. So here's the review slide. The metaphor is a journey. I want you to just think about it more long term. Your professional goals need to sit in the context of what is it that you want in that journey, all right? Longer than just what's next after that, and what's next after that. Our notions of destination and direction, i.e. getting to the top, are heavily influenced by those career values. Career paths are navigated through distinct topography. So think about that, right? And the topography can be different based on the kind of career path that we might be on, occupational, organizational, or entrepreneurial. Career paths are best constructed as a lattice versus a ladder. And measuring career success by the amount of career best moments is a great way to make sure that you are not just singularly focused on, did I get this job, but rather, did I experience all the things that I wanted, whether or not I got the job or not. So I want to stop and see if there are any questions along the way that I can address or answer.
Thank you, Betsy. With that, like Betsy said, we'll just open it up for questions. Again, you can submit your questions using the questions box on the sidebar, and you can expand and collapse that sidebar using the orange arrow if you did happen to minimize it. Betsy, as we wait for some questions to come in, working in executive development, I work with individuals in all stages of their career. And one of the questions that often comes up is, how do I find out what I'm really passionate about in my career? And is there a good place to start?
That's a hard question. Like, how do you find your passion? Right. One of the things that I say to people is, sometimes to find your passion, you have to find what is dissatisfying to you, and then reverse engineer that to say, so if that was gone, would I in fact be highly satisfied with what I do? That's one way to look at it. Like, what are the dissatisfiers? What are the things that really get in the way for you? The other thing I look at is, where do you find your energy? And I use the concept of flow. If you've ever heard of flow, this idea of, if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you are completely into what you're doing and you've lost track of what's going on around you, you've even lost track of the time, you found yourself in flow, right? In a flow moment where no one has to encourage you to do the work. You simply want to do the work because you're into the work. Sort of reflecting on those moments to say, what is it about the work or the work condition that is actually driving my energy level up? So I've had situations where the passion and interest that I have is more aligned to the people that I work with than necessarily the problems that we're solving. In other cases, like I think about in my career, there was a time when I got to work on really diversity, inclusion, and equity. And, that was an important, I didn't realize that I was passionate about it till I got into the opportunity to do that. And then I became very passionate about it. And it created a highly satisfying work experience for me. Again, not because I had a particular title or a job, focus, but rather it was a subject problem focus that was really driving my passion. So I think to look at that career best model and look at it in terms of what really drives your energy and where do you, what are things that really create that high level of energy and what are the things that really drain your energy?
Great, thank you so much for that. We had a question come in from Anthony, who asks, how can I balance between the rigidity of a plan and the flexibility of unexpected opportunities?
Yeah, so if you're in a, so I don't know if the plan is your plan or it's someone else's plan. So what happens is a lot of times we get into career situations where the organization, in its wisdom of how it actually wants to use your talent over a longer period of time than just this job. So I might be looking at Anthony is here today, and here's where Anthony will be tomorrow, and we want to try to plan for that. Is I think the one thing is to be sort of brutally honest with yourself about knowing, well, first of all, holding yourself accountable to knowing what that plan is and what the process would be to move from one stage of the plan to the next stage of the plan. And is it something that actually you, in fact, are driven by, right? Other than, well, this is, in order for me to be successful, this is what I have to do. If it's not, if there are other things that you want in the work that you do and the career that you have, I think it's important that you communicate that. It may not be that the organization can fulfill those things for you, but you can think about how you can use the work that you're currently doing along a plan to find ways to enhance what it is that's important to you. And if it gets to a point where those things become most important to you, then the plan isn't going to work for you. You're going to follow the plan and it will achieve certain things for you, but you will have given up the other things that are important. And the question becomes, can you make that, is that trade-off the right trade-off for you?
Thank you. Question from Tim. What role do mentors play in this journey?
I think mentors are really critical. And, you know, we think about mentors as, oh, I got to go out. Can I knock on your door? Hey, can I be, will you be my mentor? Mentors are really there to provide sage advice. But a mentor can be a colleague. It doesn't have to be someone who is more senior or who actually can influence whether or not, your career goes in a certain direction. Those are always good to have, don't get me wrong. But if you don't have that in your career today, don't underestimate the value of your relationships with colleagues who have different perspectives and potentially different experiences than you have, right? That can provide you with insight. I think mentors, not only to help you specifically in giving advice and sharing their own experiences, but I think mentors give insight into how you are thinking about things and possibly asking great questions that help you really consider whether or not you're on the right path, whether or not you are doing all the things that you need to do in order to move forward in the way that you have set a goal for, right? I think about mentors for me have asked me questions like, well, that's an interest. Why is it that you think that that's so important? Right? Just that question alone can be a great conversation that makes you really be honest about what is behind, for example, a goal or an objective that you have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Betsy. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today and watching. We want to just remind you that a copy of the recorded presentation today will be made available in the coming days. And keep an eye out for a survey to provide your response to how we're doing for you. And for more alumni information, please go check out business.wisc.edu/alumni. Again, my name is Jeremiah DeGullen with CPED, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, everybody.